If you don't like crocheting two hexagons and then sewing them together, stick with this video because I'm going to show you how to crochet a long sleeve cardigan in one piece. And don't hesitate to subscribe because there are going to be lots of ingenious projects coming soon that require no sewing or assembly. You could say it's my signature style. We'll be making sweaters, tops, shorts, pants, skirts, and who knows what else. You can also follow me on Instagram where I mainly speak English and TikTok where I speak French. I share shorter videos and my daily life as a crochet designer there. The written pattern with a diagram for this design will be available on my Ko-fi and Ravelry pages as soon as I finish writing it. All the links are in the description. Remember that you can adjust the video playback speed if it's too slow or too fast. There are several language options available for automatic translation in the playback settings if you'd like to watch this video in another language. The French version of this video is on my French channel, Drama Crochet. Hello everyone, I'm Annie from Drama Crochet and welcome to this new crochet tutorial. The cardigan we're going to make is the fitted version of Momo, but with long sleeves, like the cardigan seed. Since spring is coming, we'll be using the classic granny stitch pattern this time, meaning with a chain stitch between groups of 3 double crochets. This gives it a more open, airy look. However, if you prefer the more compact version with smaller holes, you can also make it with the granny stitches closer together, as in my previous tutorials. In fact, the brown and white cardigan was made with the tight granny stitch pattern. The modification involves adding one more chain stitch everywhere compared to the tight version. Since almost all my tutorials are based on the measurements, you can use any yarn or materials you like. No need to test or adjust your tension. Your cardigan will always be the right size. Therefore, the amount of yarn will depend on the size of the cardigan. For my size M, I used a 6mm hook and 500 grams of acrylic yarn, approximately 1,200 meters in total, which is equivalent to 1,300 yards. You'll need to plan your yarn generously as I can't give you the exact amount. I encourage you to check out my other tutorials for more information, as I sometimes share exclusive details that I might not always think of. The one-piece octagonal construction is similar to the hexagonal construction. Instead of a central point, there is a central band around which the work is made in closed rounds, just like a granny square. You simply need to start by making the central band the correct length according to the desired size of the garment. To make filming this video easier, I'm going to reduce the scale by half, as if I were crocheting a cardigan for a mini-me who would have half of all my measurements. I use a 5mm crochet hook with matching acrylic yarn, and the rest of the materials are the usual: a tape measure, stitch markers, and a yarn needle to weave in the ends. A small crochet hook would also work, and a pair of scissors. The very first step is obviously to take measurements too precisely. We'll start with the desired width for the back of the cardigan. Take your tape measure and measure the widest part of your chest. Add the desired ease if you want your garment to be more or less fitted, and then divide that measurement by 2. This is the width of the back of the cardigan, which is the measurement between the 2 central points of the 2 armpits. In the video, I might say back width or just width is the same thing. Similarly, I might say granny stitch or group of 3 double crochets. It also means the same thing. Since mini-me chest measurement is 50 centimeters, the width is 50 divided by 2, which equals 25 centimeters. The second measurement is the sleeve length from the opposite side of the neck. Place the 0 mark of the tape measure on the side of the neck and note the measurement on the opposite wrist, where you want the sleeve to end. This measurement should be longer than the width. We'll simply call this measurement the neck wrist. And it's 35 centimeters for mini-me. If you've already followed one of my cardigan tutorials, Momo or Sid, I mentioned that we'll be working a lot with these 2 measurements. I'm going to show you 2 ways to make the center band. The first is the equivalent of the one for Momo cardigan. We start with a slip knot, then chain 7, slip stitch into the first stitch to close the circle, Next, chain 3, which count as the first double crochet. Then work 2 double crochets into the circle to create a group of 3 double crochets. As I mentioned, we can call it granny stitch or group of 3 double crochet, it's the same thing. Then repeat the following sequence 4 times, chain 3 and granny stitch in the circle. This gives a total of 5 granny stitches in the circle. Next, repeat, chain 3, turn, then work a granny stitch in the chain 3 space. Continue in this way until you reach a length equivalent to the desired width for the back of the cardigan measured from the starting circle. That is 25 centimeters for mini me. You need to work an odd number of rows because aligned with the starting circle, there must be a space on the last row. The chain 2 spaces in the Momo and Seed patterns therefore become chain 3 spaces with the classic granny stitch pattern. Chain 3 and turn, then work 4 granny stitches in the same space with 3 chain stitches between each granny stitch. So here we have 4 granny stitches in the same space, making a total of 6 around the last space. We can count 4 chain 3 spaces, which will be the corner spaces, the vertices that mark the ends of each side. As I said at the beginning, we make a chain 1 between each group of 3 double crochets. So chain 1, then granny stitch in the next space. And we continue like this up to and including the starting circle. We close the run with the chain 1 and a half double crochet, worked into the top of the 3 chains of the very first double crochet. As with the hexagon, we have 6 granny stitches around the 2 centers of the armpits, which are at the 2 ends of the central band. And we have 8 vertices, the corner spaces that define the 8 sides of the octagon. In summary, the structure will be 3 chain stitches for the corner spaces and 1 chain stitch between each group of 3 double crochets when crocheting along the sides. I'm now going to show you the second method for making the central band. You can choose whichever technique you prefer. We make a loose slip knot. I don't tighten it all the way. You will see why in a moment. We're going to make a foundation chain whose length will be equal to the width of the back plus a margin of about 10 centimeters. My width is 25 centimeters, so I add 10 centimeters, making it 35 centimeters. Then turn and skip 5 stitches and start working in the 6th stitch from the hook. Make 3 double crochets. chain 1 and skip 1 stitch, and repeat 3 double crochets. Chain 1 and skip 1, and so on. From time to time, check if the desired width has been reached. I reach a width of 25 centimeters. Chain 1, skip 1, and then double crochet in the next stitch. This creates a symmetrical space at the beginning and end of the row. For the extra stitches on the foundation, you can either undo them, which is made easier by the loose slip knot, or if there are a lot of them, as in my case here, you can cut the chain 4 stitches from the last double crochet and undo the extra chain stitches up to the second to last one, as we'll tighten that one to make a knot. Here we can clearly see that I have 3 stitches left. I'm going to undo 2 of them, and the very last one, which looks like a little pretzel, I'm going to tighten by pulling on the end of the yarn to make a knot. This row will be the center of the central band. If I compare it to the first method, it's the equivalent of the center part right here. And the 2 spaces at either end are the centers of the 2 armpits. We're then going to crochet around this row, creating the 8 sides and 8 corners, thus obtaining the starting octagonal central band. Chain 3, which count as the very first double crochet, and add 2 double crochets in the space to form the first group of 3 double crochets. Then repeat 3 times, chain 3 and granny stitch in the same space. Which makes a total of 4 granny stitches in the same space. We will add the last one at the end of the round. After that, you already know the pattern. Chain 1, skip 3 stitches, which correspond to the 3 double crochets that follow, and make a group of 3 double crochets in the chain 1 gap. Continue crocheting in this way until you reach the other end of the row. Always alternate a chain 1 and granny stitch to create this staggered pattern. In the last space, make 5 groups of 3 double crochets with chain 3 between each group. This gives a total of 6 granny stitches around this space. Continue the round with the same pattern, alternating chain 1 and granny stitch. Close the round as before with a chain 1 and a half double crochet at the top of the 3 chain double crochet at the beginning of the round. This starting band is the very first round of our work. The advantage of the first method is that there is nothing to unravel. There's no need to crochet on a foundation chain, an exercise many crocheters dread. As for the second method, it's possible to change colors between the central row and the first round. But apart from that, the two are quite similar. After the initial central band, we'll now plan every detail of the rest of our cardigan, determining the total number of rounds, assigning them the colors we want to use, determining the number of rows to add to the sleeve openings, and distributing them across the different rounds and colors. Thanks to the checkerboard-like pattern of the granny stitch, with its succession of groups of 3 double crochets and holes, we can use the center band as a gauge swatch and thus precisely determine the different numbers we'll use to create a custom fit garment. A quick note before we get into the heart of the matter: all the steps that follow are valid for the Momo and Seed cardigan, but I haven't gone into too much detail about them before for the sake of simplicity. I didn't want these first tutorials to be too long, and I received feedback about the difficulty of the math section in the very first videos. So I really hope this one will be easier to understand. I'm going to give fairly detailed explanations about the whys and wherefores of all the measurements and numbers we'll be using, but if it doesn't interest you at all, you can skip this chapter and go straight to the formula. We'll start by determining the total number of rounds to work. We note that the center band counts as the first round, thanks to the checkerboard pattern of the granny stitch. By looking at the band vertically, we can clearly count the number of rows between the two armpits. Since the front panels grow from the centers of the two armpits, with each round, they will grow by one more row. And after half the total number of rows between the two armpits, these two front panels will meet in the middle. I calculate half of the total number of rows. Here I have 19 rows. I divide it by 2 equals 9.5, which I round up to 10. And because there is a granny stitch every 2 rows, this number is simply the number of granny stitches between the two armholes. This simply means that the number of rounds needed to join the two front panels is therefore the number of granny stitches between the two armholes. Here it is equal to 10. I'm providing this explanation for those curious people who ask me about the relationship between the number of holes or granny stitches and the number of rows to work. I hope I haven't lost you though. If it is too technical, I apologize. So for the total number of granny stitches between the two armholes, we'll subtract the equivalent number of granny stitches equal to the desired spacing between the two front panels. That is the neckline width. Note that we will add more rounds to the front panels after assembly when we crochet the collar. So I suggest you to simply subtract the width of your neck. For the full size, I'm going to subtract 10 centimeters. I have a small neck, and crochet is naturally stretchy, so I'm not worried. 10 centimeters is equivalent to 5 centimeters for mini me. So for the scale of this tutorial, I'll subtract 5 centimeters. We will call n the number of group of 3 double crochets between the two armpits after subtracting the neck width. I subtract 5 centimeters and count 8. And 8 is the total number of rounds to make the body of the cardigan. We will assemble on the last round, n. That's the round number 8 in this example. Unless you prefer to sew, you can crochet n rounds without assembling and then sew the tops of the sleeves after. On the last round with the assembly, I will also show you how to tighten the cuffs by adding a few rows with narrower stitches along the sides of the sleeve openings. This is optional. You can absolutely use a standard construction and add a border to the sleeve opening later. After determining the number of rounds for the cardigan body, we'll determine the number of rows to add for the sleeve extension. To do this, we'll simply subtract the 2 crucial measurements we took at the very beginning, the neck wrist minus the width. In this example, the neck wrist is 35 centimeters and the width is 25 centimeters. 35 minus 25 equals 10. As a side note, if you've already followed my cardigan seed pattern tutorial, This measurement is also the length of the sleeve extension. By crocheting the neck wrist length from the width, we've effectively added an extension equal to the difference between the two measurements. Then simply transfer this 10 centimeters to any row on the center band and count the corresponding number of group of 3 double crochets. Here I'm counting 4. That's the number of pairs of rows to add to the sleeve openings. So we'll add the rows 2 at a time, that is back and forth. We can draw a parallel with the seed cardigan because these rows were added all at once at the very first round when executing the central tape. The total number of rounds to work for the body of the cardigan is equal to the number of granny stitches across the width minus the neckline. In the case of Mini-Me, it's 25 minus 5 equal 20 centimeters, and simply by comparing those 20 centimeters on my starting band, I count 8 granny stitches. So the total number of rounds to make the Mini-Me cardigan is 8. The first round is the central band and the last round is the assembly round. As for the sleeve extension, we're trying to determine the number of granny stitches on the length difference between the neck wrist measurement and the width of the cardigan. For Mini-Me, the sleeve length 35 centimeters minus the width 25 centimeters equals 10. Just like before, I compare this 10 centimeter with any line on the center band and count 4 granny stitches. Therefore, I need 4 pairs of rows to add to the side of the sleeve openings to reach the desired sleeve length. These 4 pairs of rows must be distributed across the end rounds. Generally, I avoid adding a pair of rows on the last round of assembly, but nothing prevents it. We're now going to distribute these 4 pair of extra rows across the total number of rounds, along with their color. Row N is equal to 8, so I need 8 rows in total. Knowing that the assembly will be done on the 8th row, I have white for the primary color and pink yarn for the secondary color. So the very first round, which is on the center band, is white. And for example, I work 1 round of pink yarn after 2 rounds of white yarn. Let's assume we reach the sleeve opening just when we change sides. The first round is already done, and for example, I'll add an extension on the second round by adding 2 rows back and forth on the sleeve opening. No extension on the third round. I add a back and forth on the 4th round. 2 back and forths on the 5th round. And I don't need to make any more extensions on the rest. So if we count the extra back and forth rows, there are indeed 4. In this first example, all the extensions were made in the main color, but they also can be made in the secondary color, depending on your preference. So here you can already see the difference in thickness between the rest of the garment and the side of the sleeve opening. For the brown and white version, I made all the extensions in the secondary color, which is white. And for the mauve and black cardigan, the extensions were all made in the main color, which is mauve. By the way, just to clarify in case it's not obvious, the brown and white version was made with the tight granny stitch, meaning without chain stitch between each granny stitch, and the mauve version was made with classic granny stitch with a chain one between each granny stitch. There are endless possibilities for distributing the extensions as long as you count them correctly. Here is the pattern I will follow for the first sleeve. I will make the extensions only on the secondary color. And here is the pattern for the second sleeve. I'm only making the extensions in the main color to show you different looks. Since I'm going to change colors of yarn, I don't need my hook to end in the middle of the corner space. So I'll make chain 3 and a slip stitch into the top of the 3 chain first double crochet. I make a second slip stitch to secure. I cut the yarn, leaving a good length so I can weave it in more easily at the end. Pull the yarn through and start with a slip knot on the new yarn. Begin with a group of 3 double crochets in the first corner space. We'll do a quick reminder of how to make a round with a granny stitch pattern in the polygonal construction. On each side, we work a group of 3 double crochets in each space in the tighter version, and with a chain 1 between each group of 3 double crochets in the standard version. The corner space is shared by 2 adjacent sides, and we make 3, 2 or 1 chain stitch to change sides and thus form the corner space for the next round. Chain 1 and a group of 3 double crochets in the next space, which is a corner space. We have finished the first side because, as we just said, a side begins and ends in a corner space. I make chain 3 to change side and move on to the next. The corner space is shared between 2 adjacent sides. I make the first group of the next side in the same corner space. And so in each corner space, we will have the last granny stitch of the previous side and the first granny stitch of the next side. And we continue crocheting the round following this pattern. We have finished the second side and we will move on to the third. So far, I have 3 sides, 1, 2, 3, and we will move on to the fourth side, which is the entire length and ends in the next corner space. We have finished the fourth side and we continue. And it goes without saying that the 8th side ends in the very first corner space. Here, since I continue with the same color, I close with a chain stitch and a half double crochet at the top of the very first double crochet of the round to have my hook in the middle of the very first corner space. When we fold our work, the beginning of the round where the hook is facing down. That is at the bottom of the front panel. The 2 sides of the sleeve openings are those adjacent to the side of the upper back, the latter being the longer side opposite the beginning of the round. So here, the 2 sides of the sleeve openings are sides number 3 and number 5, and we're going to place a stitch marker in the corner space at the end of the sleeve opening. According to my chart, on this third round, I'm going to add 2 pairs of fronts on the sleeve opening. We start the round the same way and crochet normally until we completely finish the side of the first sleeve opening. That is, up to the first marker. We'll work 2 rows back and forth. We start with chain 3, turn, and continue with the same pattern all the way across to the very last space. That makes 1 row, and the structure of all the other rows will be the same. Chain 3 and start the row. Turn and make a group of 3 double crochets in each space with a chain stitch between each group, as usual. That makes 1 pair. I need a second one. So here I have 1 and 2 back and forth pair of rows. Above the stitch marker, I have then 5 rows. And the sleeve is already starting to lengthen. We can remove the stitch marker because the corner space has changed position. We continue the round as before, so here there's a change of side. We make chain 3. Simply repeat exactly the same thing when we reach the second marker. But to show you another style, I'm going to make the second sleeve differently. And I don't have an extension to make on the second sleeve on the third round. And we have the new corner space. If you've used the tight credit stitch pattern, like for the brown and white cardigan, simply follow the same logic. Chain 2 at the beginning of each row, the same applies when changing sides, and of course, there are no chain stitches between each group of 3 double crochets. You now have all the tools to make the body of your cardigan. Follow your chart carefully. I added the first pair of rows to the opening of the second sleeve on the fourth round. On the fifth round, I have 2 pairs back and forth, and on the sixth, I have another pair back and forth. No changes on round 4, 5, and 6 for the first sleeve. The last 2 pairs of rows are added on the 7th round in pink. I finished all the extensions on the second sleeve, and the measurement from the sleeve opening to the opposite front panel is exactly 35 centimeters, mini-me's neck wrist length. The first sleeve is still a little short, which is normal. I finished the 7th round with 2 extra pairs of rows on the side of the sleeve opening, so both sleeves are now the same length. We'll move on to the last round of the cardigan body, the assembly round, which includes an optional step. I'm talking, of course, about the fitted cuffs. We'll look at 2 different styles, and you can choose which you prefer. The first style is to add rows with closure stitches at the sleeve opening. The second is to make a ribbed cuff. Let's see the first style. Crochet to the end of the sleeve opening at the first stitch marker. Then chain 2, turn, and make a group of 2 double crochets in each space with no chain between the groups. We follow the same principle as for the extra rows for the sleeve extensions, meaning they must be added in pairs so that we finish on the correct side to continue the round. When we are satisfied with the thickness of the cuff, we switch sides and assemble the top of the sleeves. Slip stitch in a previous corner space to close the sleeve opening. Then chain 1. However, there's a slight change in the stitches we'll crochet at the beginning of the next side. Unlike a granny stitch with 3 double crochets whose height is almost equal to its width, a group of 2 double crochets is thinner, adding that there are no chain stitches between each group of 2 double crochets. Therefore, we can't simply crochet a group of 2 double crochets when moving to the next side, nor even a group of 3 double crochets. No, the closest shape to a group of 2 double crochets, rotated 90 degrees, would be a group of 3 single crochets. That's why we'll make a group of 3 single crochets in each space, where the equivalent on the top panel is a group of 2 double crochets. So a group of 3 single crochets in the first space, chain 1, release the loop, insert the hook into the next space on the top panel, pick up the loop and pull it through the space. Continue. The next group on the top panel is another group of 2 double crochets, so I make a group of 3 single crochets in the next space on the bottom panel. Chain 1, release the loop, and pick it up again through the next space on the top panel. When we're back to groups of 3 double crochets on the top panel, we also make groups of 3 double crochets on the bottom panel. And so on until the first sleeve is completely joined. And we do exactly the same thing for the second sleeve. But for my little cardigan, I'm going to show you the second style with the second sleeve. So, for the second style, we crochet to the end of the sleeve opening. Then we make a foundation chain, the same length as the desired cuff width. I have made 6 chains. I'm happy with the thickness and I make one last turning chain. Turn. Of course, we skip the turning chain because it won't count as a stitch. And we make a slip stitch in the back loop in each stitch along the entire length of the foundation chain. In my case, that makes 6 slip stitches in total. Let's assume we've been working in the first stitch on the sleeve edging. We'll skip the second and make a slip stitch in the third stitch. Turn. Let's say that the last slip stitch we just made is a turning slip stitch, so we'll skip it and go straight back to working on the 6 slip stitches in the back loop. Keep in mind the number of stitches you have so you don't forget any, especially the last one, which is always a little hidden. Chain 1 for the turning chain, then turn and continue working 6 slip stitches in the back loop. At the sleeve opening edge, skip 1 stitch and make the turning slip stitch in the next stitch. Turn and continue in this way. This cuff is my favorite because it closely resembles the one ribbing in knitting. It's very stretchy and visually very pleasing. On the very last row of the rib cuff, we'll work the slip stitches at the beginning and the end simultaneously to close the cuff. This time, we're not working in the back loop anymore. Insert the hook into the stitch so that it passes under both loops of the stitch. Then, similarly, on the opposite side, insert the hook into the last stitch of the foundation chain so that there are 2 loops on top of the hook. Then make a slip stitch. Repeat this process in the next stitch until the entire cuff is closed. Finally, make a slip stitch in the last stitch on the sleeve opening. Chain 1 slip stitch into the opposite corner space, and another chain 1. Before continuing with the connection of the top of the sleeve, we'll turn the cuff right side out. We can see the slip stitch join is here. We continue on the next side, connecting in the same way as for the first sleeve. For the last connection, which is made at the change of side, chain 1, slip stitch in the next space on the top panel, chain 1, and continue as usual to finish the round. You are free to choose which style of cuff you want to make. The circumference is almost the same, or you can even leave it out altogether. We finally reached the finishing. We're going to make a collar as we've done in several tutorials, but this time we will again use the extra rows method to make a longer fold-over collar. So always 10 centimeters from the top of the cardigan, 5 centimeters for mini-me cardigan. Place 2 stitch markers in 2 symmetrical space on the edge of the 2 front panels. We'll consider these 2 marked space as corner spaces, and we'll crochet on 4 sides. On the side between these 2 stitch markers, that is, the side that corresponds to the neckline, we'll work back and forth, just like we crocheted the sleeves extensions. We begin the round as usual up to the marked space. We've completed the first side, then chain 3, and a second group of 3 double crochets in the same space to begin the next side. And we continue to the next marker, so to the end of the neckline side. The sleeve joining area counts as 1 space, so we make the granny stitch in the front panel. Again, this join counts as 1 space, so I make a granny stitch on the front panel. And we finish the second side, the neckline side. And we'll add the extensions. So here we'll work some back and forth rows as needed to achieve the desired height for the neckline. The row structure is exactly the same. Chain 3, turn, and make a group of 3 double crochets in each space with a chain 1 between each group. I've just worked 1 pair of rows. I'm checking to make sure the length is right, and I'm going to work another pair of rows. Now I have the right length. Let's continue on the next side, and as you already know, we chain 3 to change sides, and off we go. We finished the round as usual. You can add a few more rows if you like, and feel free to add your personal touches, a border, laces, buttons, a zipper, anything you want. But I would appreciate if you credited me if you share your creations inspired by my designs and tutorials. For now, I'm stopping here. I'm not going to add any border. So last 3 chains, slip stitch to close the round, and 2 slip stitches to secure. Cut and pull, fasten off, and finally weave in all those loose ends. Thank you so much for following this tutorial to the end. It took me quite a while to make. Give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Feel free to give me feedback. I'd like to know if all the theory was clear and helpful. I won't repeat it for future tutorials unless there's more to say on the subject. You can purchase the written pattern in English or tip on my Ko-fi page to support me, but there is absolutely no obligation. You can also share the video with your crafty friends and DIY fans if you'd like. All the links are in the description. See you soon!